DW Africa Link.
Explosions tore through Maiduguri, the largest city in northeastern Nigeria, on Monday night, killing at least 23 people and injuring more than 100 in one of the deadliest attacks the region has seen in years. Nigeria's president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has condemned the blasts as desperate acts by terrorists under pressure, directing security chiefs to relocate to Maiduguri and oversee the response. What's ironic is that Maiduguri isn't just any city. It's the seat of government in Borno State and the command center for Nigeria's entire counterinsurgency effort. Moreover, it's the birthplace of the Boko Haram insurgency, yet it's the same city that insurgents have now struck at its heart. Residents who began to believe the worst years were behind them now say the city feels on edge once again.
So this is really disturbing because a lot of people now don't feel safe and a lot of people are agitating for more security measures to be put in place so that other forms of occurrences will not happen again. Suicide attacks in these kinds of time is really damaging and it has affected the peace and stability that we are hoping for to last long. Boko Haram and its sub-faction have been launching continued attacks on communities.
Security forces have not been able to really establish security to a very large extent, and they have not been able to prevent cases like this from happening. So I'm not confident about them being able to prevent attacks like this from happening.
I am an eyewitness to the incident. This is unfortunate for everyone, whether you are a Christian or a Muslim. The incident occurred at about 7:35 p.m. We were really scared. We pray that God will protect us. We thought these kinds of attacks have become history, but it's becoming fresh again. We don't know what the terrorists are planning. We can only pray against that. The government is trying to provide security, but until God wills, if you are from this place, you move around while being vigilant with your environment. You also try to avoid crowds because of attacks like these.
When it comes to the security issue in this country, there's nothing like being confident, because before you know it, the next strike is here, the next bomb blast is here. So I just hope that they would really put an end to it. They would really put necessary measures to stop this. But confidence, far from it.
Is Maiduguri's calm cracking into a broader crisis? That's what we're exploring next. I'm Lucy Riley, and this is Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Authorities say the attackers were suspected suicide bombers, a tactic long used by Boko Haram. Officials say the explosions came just hours after troops repelled an overnight assault by suspected Islamist fighters on the city's outskirts, prompting concerns about a renewed uptick in militant activity. While investigations continue, no group has yet claimed responsibility. So is Nigeria prepared and doing enough to prevent further attacks? To help us unpack this, we're joined by senior researcher at Good Governance Africa, Malik Samuel. Also with us is DW's Abiodun Jamiu reporting from Abuja. Abiodun, let's start with you. What's the situation on the ground in Maiduguri right now? How are people reacting?
It gives the people a sense of deja vu. This is something they had seen before, and they thought that that's something that had passed by and will not have to experience it in the city center, in the capital city. And then I'm having to experience that brutal blast, killing about 23 people and injuring hundreds of people, usher in a mix of shock, fear, and anxiety. This is a city that has lived through years of insurgency. And if there's anything, Maiduguri is known for its resilience over the years. It's give them a sense of deja vu of what they had passed through, and having to relive that now in 2026, when we are currently seeing resurgence of violence across northern Nigeria, and particularly in the Lake Chad region, ushering a sense of fear and anxiety among communities or locals in the area.
And we'll speak more about this sense of deja vu. But we're hearing about multiple attack sites. What do we know so far about how these explosions unfolded across the city?
What we know so far suggests a coordinated, multi-site attack. There was one at the, Monday market. There's one at the post office, and there's another one at the entrance of the, teaching hospital. So it's a coordinated and quite very similar to what we would expect from, insurgent groups operating in the region for the past, nearly 20 years. The timing is also important at the moment because we're seeing, resurgence in the attacks, particularly in the northeast, outskirts of the town, attacks on military bases where we see insurgents, attacking military bases and, cutting off with weapons. But in the city center, it was not expected. It happened when late in the evening, when people were just coming out, it's Ramadan, iftar, people come out together, bound together to eat, to observe their iftar, like break their fast, go to the mosques and pray. So it's offered an opportunity for max impact. I authority believe that it was likely suicide bombing, which is, practically associated with groups like Boko Haram.
Let me bring you on this, Malik Samuel. And Abiodun has talked about the timing being quite interesting, especially now it being the season of Ramadan and it's not really expected. After years of relative calm in Maiduguri, what does this attack tell us about the current state of Islamic insurgency in northeastern Nigeria?
I think this particular attack on Maiduguri, it is not surprising entirely. Because just 3 months ago, on the 24th of December, 2025, there was a suicide bombing in Maiduguri by the Jamaatul al-Sunnah Da'watul Jihad faction of Boko Haram. But this particular one, given the intensity and the multiplicity of it in 3 different locations, I think it is a clear message to the authorities to say, if you think Maiduguri is safe, well, we've just shown that Maiduguri is not as safe as you think, or Maiduguri is not out of our reach. Because before now, Maiduguri had always been seen as out of reach, sort of the group. Because apart from being the seat of government in the state, it also houses the headquarters of different security agents, including the counterinsurgency operation, the office in charge of the counterinsurgency operation in the northeast. So this particular attack, I think, is symbolic. But one thing I think people also need to understand is that usually during festive period, there are threats, usually threats of attack. But what we've seen now is that I think this attack was deliberate to take security agents unawares. Usually you would expect that at the end of Ramadan, that's during the Eid celebration, there would be attack or threat of attack, which means there will be heightened security. There will be deployment of security forces to prevent any attack. But this attack now happening before the Eid celebration, I think was clearly to take the security forces unawares. And we know that this was coming 24 hours after a failed ISWAP attempted attack, still still on Maiduguri. So this attack, I think, was symbolic, showing the authorities that, well, Maiduguri is not out of their reach and that they have the capacity to launch attacks on any part of the state.
And the fact that no group has claimed responsibility, how significant is that in helping us understand who might be behind these attacks?
I think first, usually this attack most likely was carried out by JAS. And even previous attacks that they've carried out, they've usually not taken responsibility, especially because of the casualty, the civilian casualty. But from the mode of operations of both factions, ISWAP and JAS, we know that ISWAP, as much as possible, tries to stay away from attacking civilians, especially Muslim civilians, because of its strategy of winning the hearts and minds, of the people. And if you go back over a decade ago, you know that the major reason for the split between the Boko Haram split in 2016 was simply the major reason was the treatment of civilians, how both groups saw civilians. JAS is indiscriminate when it comes to attacking civilians, while ISWAP tries to be measured, to stay away from attacking Muslim Muslim civilians. So this particular attack most likely was carried out by JAS, especially the group under Ali Ngule. It was the same group that carried out the attack of 24th December 2025, though it did not, it didn't claim responsibility. So I think the modus operandi of both factions easily tells us which group was responsible for the attack.
And I just want to loop you back in here, Abiodun. Security forces are saying that normalcy has been restored. From where you are right now, how accurate does that really feel locally among the people?
On the ground, among local communities, the people are trying to stay away from crowded areas. Even in some areas, particularly marketplaces like the Monday markets, city centers are still being deserted because no one really knows what might happen next. I mean, this is a security situation, especially in Maiduguri. People only know what has happened now. No one can actually predict among local communities or among the locals that this is what will happen next. So the fear of unknown, the fear of what will happen next is actually really deep in among the local. There's so much that people are not really, there are not much people outside at the moment, because they're trying to themselves play safe. I mean, they say trust in God, but tie your camel. So a lot of people try to be very, very vigilant at the moment and not, expose themselves unnecessarily in crowded places.
And Malik, are we seeing a tactical shift here, especially with the return of suicide attacks? I mean, earlier on, Abiodun mentioned that this is more or less a sense of deja vu that the people have been feeling.
I think what this practically showed, JAS is very, very much stronger than the authorities gave it credit for. The attention had largely been on ISWAP, the Islamic State, West Africa province, because of its link to ISIS. But what JAS has shown with this attack and previous ones is that it's very much around. And the fact that we're still seeing the deployment of suicide bombers, it seems the group is still being able to find people to volunteer for these suicide missions. I think one of the problems the group had previously was that it was finding it difficult to get volunteers for suicide missions. But it seems it's been able to find people to do that, whether it's convincing them or it is putting them under duress to carry out these attacks. But the group has shown that it's now able to find people to use as suicide bombers.
Right. Malik, how would you assess Nigeria's current counterinsurgency strategy? Is it a containment, deterrence, or something else entirely?
It's clearly reactionary. It's clearly being on the back foot. I think Nigerian authorities, especially the security agents, have ceded the initiative to the groups, were rather defensive instead of being offensive. Earlier this year, there was a massive offensive operation by the Nigerian security forces that disrupted the Islamic State West Africa province in one of its strongholds called Alagarno Forest. But there seems to have been a slowdown of the counterinsurgency operation, allowing the group now to regroup and also be on the offensive. And our strategy, if there is any at all, it seems to be very much defensive, and reactionary. So with that, you cannot successfully take on a group that is that has 10,000 fighters at least, and also has different support from different groups, and also with the kind of resources that these groups have. Mind you, not long ago, there were a media report that the Nigerian government paid huge money as ransom to this group. So the group, in terms of resources, it's very much able to fund so many of these attacks. But it seems the Nigerian government doesn't know exactly how to contain this spreading threats.
I'd like to pull you back in here, Abiodun. I mean, are there any visible changes on the ground in terms of security presence? Perhaps there are more checkpoints, patrols, restrictions. What are you seeing in the sense of the security situation? There
have been noticeable increase in security presence, across Maiduguri, across different parts of the city. There were roadblocks here and there, trying to screen people who are coming in, trying to screen vehicles coming in and out of Maiduguri. And then we have, military, and police patrols across major roads, trying to be, vigilant, see what is going on in the city, and while at the same time exert a show of force that the state is in control of the city and trying to allay fears among locals that, they are safe, that the Nigerian government or the security forces are there for them. We're also seeing, heightened surveillance around markets and hospitals and also public spaces, because these are, noticeable targets. These are soft targets for terror groups to attack. So we have also seen, increased presence of security forces around these areas. Bomb disposal units has also been deployed to sweep, across the city, because there are still fear. There are speculations that maybe there are more suicide bombers out there, or maybe there are more bombs, explosives, planted somewhere around the city. So there are no bomb disposal units, trying to sweep that across it. So far, what the state are doing is simply to urge residents to remain vigilant. Also report whatever kind of suspicious movements, and also encourage them to avoid crowded places where possible. So these measures, for me personally, about aim at preventing further attack, and also reassuring the public that the state is there to protect them, the state is there to exert control over the city, and also deter these same insurgents that now the reinforcement has come to the city.
And you've spoken with residents, I'm sure, across the city. How much trust do they still have in the security forces' ability to protect them, especially after this attack? I
spoke with a trader who came all the way from Kano and was caught in Maiduguri in the blast when it happened. The same trader is, at this point, reassessing his choices, because what he came to the city, he could not achieve it. There are also local residents that are saying that they also have to take some time off to avoid, in public spaces. So at the moment, there are trust in security operatives, to exert control, to prevent further attack, in the city center. At the same time, the local residents are also taking the responsibility for their safety.
To what extent are internal divisions within jihadist groups shaping the pattern of violence we're seeing now, Malik?
The internal divisions amongst the different jihadist groups, especially the two Boko Haram factions in the northeast, I don't think this internal division has done much to affect their operation or their campaign, against the state. I think both factions realize that they have a common enemy first, before whatever divides them. The common enemy now is the state, represented by the security forces. So this is why we've been able to see attacks by ISWAP in one area of the state, then attacked by JAS in another areas of the state, leading to speculations that these groups could be collaborating or sharing information about the targets, to eat. If you said about this division 2-3 years ago, you would say, it was strategic, because it resulted in the death of some of the fighters and commanders, also resulting into mass exit of fighters. But now we're not seeing any concrete evidence that division is hampering the group's operation. Which speaks to the need for the security forces to also look at how to counter them, because one of the major problems we have is the lack of synergy between the different security agencies in the country, the Air Force, the Army, also the SSS, which is in charge of intelligence gathering. So the lack of synergy, I think, is hampering the state or the government's ability to respond timely to the threat, by these groups.
And could this attack signal a broader resurgence of militant activity, especially across the wider Lake Chad basin?
Yeah, we're seeing that already. Just about less than 2 weeks ago, there were 7 attacks by ISWAP in one night, targeting 7 military bases. We had never seen ISWAP this coordinated or having that ability to carry out such attack. Last year, 2025, was the most productive year for ISWAP as a result of the burning of the camp campaign launched by ISIS. But already we are in March, first quarter of 2026. We're seeing the group doing far more than it did this time of the year last year. So we're seeing not just a resurgence, but also with the attacks on Maiduguri, the ability of the group to reach to areas where the government hitherto thought it was out of the reach, of the state, of the group. We're seeing the same thing in Niger. We're seeing collaboration between ISWAP in Nigeria and the IS Sahel collaborating to carry out attack in Niger. We're seeing in the northwest of Nigeria and the north central, we're seeing more of a collaboration, potential collaboration between Jenim and Jas and also Lakra as well. So it's a big problem for Nigeria, not just around the Lake Chad, the Lake Chad Basin region, but if you come towards the northwest and north central Nigeria, we're having this resurgence. So it is a big concern for Nigeria, especially heading into an election period. Campaigns will soon start where you would expect large gatherings of people. Election will hold in January next year. You would expect large gathering of people. So with what is happening now, I think people will be having a rethink about their movement and also about their participation in the political process. So it is a serious concern.
Malik, looking beyond the immediate security response, what practical steps, whether political, military, regional even, do you believe are essential to sustainably reduce insurgency in northeastern Nigeria that hasn't already been done?
I think we've overflowed the issue of synergy, but it is very, very critical. The lack of synergy between the important security forces or agencies tackling this issue is one of the reasons why we're seeing this resurgence. Because you would expect that the SSS, which is the Nigeria topmost agency responsible for intelligence gathering, you would expect the SSS to have a lot of intelligence. So what are they doing with this intelligence? Are they sharing with the right authorities? Are they sharing it timely? If they are, so what is being done with this intelligence? But I think again there is a failure on the part of the security forces to actually understand these groups, how they operate. I think there is an underestimation of the group. We seem to think this group is the same group that it was 10 years ago, but we're seeing these groups constantly adapting their strategy, right? With support from the Islamic State, but also with support from local communities. We're also seeing these groups raising serious revenues. ISWAP around the Lake Chad Basin Island, then Jas raising revenues from hostage taking, ransom payment, by the state. So you need to sort out the problem of lack of synergy between the different government agencies. But second, you need to find ways to cut out the finances of these groups. If you're able to asphyxiate them, it makes it difficult for them to operate. ISWAP needs money to take care of fighters' family when they are away. It needs money to buy fuel. It needs money to buy spare parts for its vehicles and all that. So without this money, it is not able to do this. And if it is not able to do this, you have fighters being discontent. You have fighters leaving the group. So you need to find a way of cutting the source, of funding or revenue from the groups. I know there are lots of talks that the group is getting funding from outside Nigeria, but that is not entirely correct. The group is raising, particularly ISWAP, raising tens of millions of dollars locally, in Nigeria. So you need to find a way to make sure that the group doesn't have access to these finances. You do that, then you can be talking about curtailing the group's ability, to launch the kind of attacks we're seeing at the moment.
And finally, given everything that we've been seeing, what direction do you think this conflict is heading into in the next few weeks or months even to come, especially given in light of what you've rightfully said, this is a critical political time for Nigeria heading into elections soon?
Unfortunately, I don't see much happening between now and the election period because politicians are now tuning off from governance issues, focusing more on campaigns. So unfortunately, we may not see much in terms of effort to counter these groups. Sadly, we may see more of such attacks or attempted attack. It's so unfortunate that just 3 months or so ago, the Nigerian president declared, a state of emergency when it comes to security. But we've not seen any changes. So I sadly don't see any difference between the strategy that we're seeing now and what we'll see going forward.
You heard from senior researcher at Good Governance Africa, Malik Samuel, and DW correspondent Abiodun Jamiu. Gentlemen, thank you for your insights.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
Security chiefs are now on the ground in Maiduguri, and investigations continue into who planned and executed the attacks. Whether this marks a broader shift in the insurgency remains to be seen. We'll be following the story closely and bring you the updates. And now we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show is co-produced and edited by Eddie Micah Jr. I'm Lucy Riley. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.